Shout out to everybody. Now, you know Roger Mayweather would say most people don't know about boxing, right? And I'm going to give you an example of that. So, even though I'm using BoxRec, I don't have to use BoxRec, okay? But I'm just using it because at this point in time, I want to show you guys something. Because I think a lot of people don't understand things and they just go with the flow, right? They go with what everybody else is saying and they don't break things down. So this video is on that. So when we look at this video, we in BoxRec, a fantasy matchup. The fantasy matchup was who you think would win if Thomas Hearns was to face Oscar De La Hoya. Now obviously people are not going to blink twice or think twice, and most people say Thomas Hearns. Just like how if we say Thomas Hearns faces Floyd Mayweather and people don't think twice, they don't blink, they say Thomas Hearns, right? Emmanuel Stewart said Thomas Hearns would wipe the fat with Floyd, wipe the ground with Floyd Mayweather, and everybody goes with that. It's Emmanuel Stewart, right? Nobody's thinking these days. You got a lot of people who are just going with what everybody else is saying as if it's the gospel, and we have that over and over. I see it in healthcare, I see it in politics, I see it in movies, I see it in sports, and this sport, boxing, is no exception to the rule, okay? Now let's think about it first. See, that's what I do. I do critical thinking. Let's think about it first and let's assess it. So I got this matchup, this fantasy matchup, from Mayweather Boxing Club, from Mayweather Boxing Channel. Okay, shout out to Mayweather Boxing Channel first of all. And it was a match between Thomas Hearns and Oscar De La Hoya. And only few people really assessed it, thought it through before they actually spoke. Everybody else was going on legacy. Now, first and foremost, most people say Thomas Hearns. He's 6'1", got a 78-inch reach. And at welterweight, this is the matchup at welterweight, he was a terror, man. Thunderous right hand. You know what I'm saying? Got that long jab, right? This is their usual argument. Hearns was just too tall, had too long a reach. Ain't nobody beating Thomas Hearns, and got powerful right hand. He would have knocked out this person, or he would have stopped that person. Okay. But a lot of people are not really thinking. Alright? And it's the same argument I have for Floyd Mayweather, but even worse, because the argument I have for Oscar De La Hoya is even stronger than Floyd Mayweather. I'm going to tell you why. Alright, so Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya at welterweight was 5'10" and a half, 73-inch reach. Who was Oscar De La Hoya's idol? Anybody out there? Answer that question. I'm going to pause and wait for y'all to answer. You got 10 seconds. Okay. Who was Oscar De La Hoya's idol? Sugar Ray Leonard. That's the first thing. But it gets better. It gets better. How many times in Oscar De La Hoya's career Oscar De La Hoya was stopped? 2 times. At middleweight against Bernard Hopkins to the body. And at welterweight against Manny Pacquiao, he was stopped. He didn't go down on the ground against Manny Pacquiao. Alright. How many times did Thomas Hearns get stopped? If I'm not mistaken, 3 times. Oh, I'm sorry. He got stopped 4 times in his career. Okay? Alright? 4 times in his career. Now, let's think about welterweight, first of all. Thomas Hearns was a freak at welterweight, but one of the things we all know about Thomas Hearns was he was like a wireframe at welterweight. He was really, really skinny. His body was really, really thin at welterweight. You touch Hearns to the body, he get hurt. Why? Because Thomas Hearns was not a welterweight. He was dried completely out at welterweight. It's not that Thomas Hearns didn't have a chin. It's that Thomas Hearns was so dehydrated at welterweight that especially in the later rounds, you could stop this dude. Okay? Now, as much as he was a terror at welterweight, a lot of people don't understand. Thomas Hearns was chinny at welterweight. Again, it wasn't that Thomas Hearns naturally in his natural weight class, which Thomas Hearns was like a super middleweight. light heavyweight. Okay, that's what Thomas Hearns really was. But because he was so dried out at welterweight, unlike Errol Spence and all those other guys, because he was so dried out at welterweight, Thomas Hearns could get knocked out. That's not a good sign. All right, and I'll prove that to you. So Thomas Hearns was undefeated at welterweight. Undefeated, okay? And until he faced Ray Leonard, who is Oscar De La Hoya's idol. Okay? Oscar De La Hoya patterned his life, his boxing career off of Ray Leonard. Ray Leonard had difficulty facing Thomas Hearns' jab until Ray Leonard put up the double guard and started walking to Hearns. He was able to block the jab, get closer to Hearns, and then get to his body, get to his head, and stop him. Right? Okay. Now, Ray Leonard stopped Thomas Hearns, especially late in the fight. But every time he clipped Hearns, got punch drunk, just like Amir Khan. He get punch drunk, he'd be wandering all around the ring, drifting all around the rim. Because the one thing about Thomas Hearns at welterweight people are not talking about is the fact he was chinny. He was very chinny at welterweight. You get to Hearns, Hearns got to keep you at bay. If you got to fight him on the inside, once you get into the inside of Hearns or mid-range of Hearns, it's over. It's curtains. And this is what everybody's forgetting. Floyd Mayweather. Nobody thinks that Floyd Mayweather is this great knockout artist. But if Mayweather got to the inside of Hearns, started working his body, and then got up top and started clipping him to the chin, Hearns was going to be out of there. And anybody who knows Mayweather in his prime, and the fighters that Mayweather fought, Hearns' dimensions, showing you how Mayweather would have boxed to Hearns, tells you immediately, as I said before, Floyd was like Aaron Pryor. He did things that Aaron Pryor did, okay, to get to a taller guy. He knew how to get to the inside of a taller guy and take that taller guy out, okay? So Floyd would have found a way to get to the inside of Hearns, and I would not be surprised if Floyd stopped Thomas Hearns, because at welterweight, Thomas Hearns, especially in the later rounds, was very, very chinny, because, again, you cannot dry yourself out that much at a weight class you're not really supposed to be in and be strong. And Hearns was just not strong at welterweight. He filled out much better at super middle, and he was quite fine at light heavyweight. Okay? And we see that here. At middleweight even, he was knocked out twice at middleweight by Iran Barkley and also by Marvin Hagler. Okay? Both times, punch drunk knockout, got square shots to the jaw, went to sleep. Okay? Completely to sleep. Okay? He didn't even get back up. Alright? But as soon as he filled out into the weight class he belonged in, which was this weight class right here, super middleweight and light heavyweight, he was much better off. Okay, at light heavyweight, he could fight on the inside, all that stuff. He was doing really well. The next time he had to retire from a fight was against Uriah Grant, who again was walking to him with the double guard. Okay, most of the guys who beat up Thomas Hearns was walking to him with a double guard. Okay. Now, here's the interesting thing about Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya, you watching him, he knows how to use the double guard. He can walk to you with a double guard. So that's kryptonite for Thomas Hearns at welterweight. The other thing a lot of people are forgetting is Oscar De La Hoya fought some freakishly big welterweights himself. Okay, he didn't always beat them, but he fought some freakishly big welterweights with some serious punching power. And people keep on forgetting that. Thomas Hearns, Oscar's faced a guy with Thomas Hearns power. Okay? Okay, so if Thomas Hearns had a 72% KO percentage, check this out. Oscar De La Hoya faced guys with that kind of KO percentage in guys such as Fernando Vargas and also Felix Trinidad. Felix Trinidad was a guy Oscar De La Hoya faced who had this freakish power. In fact, he had a 78% KO ratio, knockout ratio. And Felix Trinidad was a huge welterweight. Okay, he also had similar dimensions to Oscar, or a little bit bigger than Oscar. Now, why this is important for people to understand is people keep on forgetting Oscar De La Hoya had a chin of steel. Okay, you ain't gonna just knock out Oscar like that. However, at welterweight, you could knock out Thomas Hearns if you can get to the inside of him. It just so happens, Oscar had the equipment to get to the inside of Thomas the Hitman Hearns. The other thing a lot of people forget is Oscar had faced some heavy hitters. Okay, he faced guys like Ike Corte. Everybody forget this. Ike Corte, the guy that knocked down Oscar De La Hoya, 74% KO knockout ratio. People forget these things, right? Thomas Hearns' freakish power, Oscar had seen before, and he had beaten guys with Thomas Hearns' freakish power. So you ain't telling me nothing. If Thomas Hearns hit Oscar, it doesn't mean that Oscar goes down on the ground. Everybody's lying, saying that Hearns would knock him out based on his fight with Roberto Duran, in which he had to put punches together to knock out Duran, by the way. Okay? And Duran's defense was just terrible, and Duran himself was sluggish, and that's because he was weight trained. But the point is, everybody's assuming Thomas Hearns would beat Oscar De La Hoya based on the legacy of Thomas Hearns. The fact that Thomas Hearns was a 5-divisional world champion. Oscar was a 6-divisional world champion. And it's these kinds of things that really bring about the problems we have. Okay? Hearns was a freak of nature. He was fantastic as a boxer. But for you to put him on that plateau based on mostly sentiment, not based on facts, is the problem with most of the people out here today. I'm not saying that Hearns couldn't beat Oscar, but I just think it's very unlikely based on Oscar's killer instinct, the fact that Oscar had a will to win at welterweight and was one of the most willingest welterweights. In fact, we can argue that Tito Trinidad was beaten by Oscar De La Hoya, that Oscar beat Felix Trinidad, that his loss at welterweight against Felix Trinidad was one in which he actually beat him. So when you look at things that way, and you look at Thomas Hearns, you gotta think to yourself, Thomas Hearns got beaten by Sugar Ray Leonard, who used the same style that Oscar himself used throughout many fights, who is Oscar's icon, Oscar himself has faced fighters with similar knockout ratios or even better knockout ratios than Hearns and beat some of them. You gotta argue that Oscar would win that fantasy matchup, not Thomas Hearns. And that Hearns, especially if it's a 15-rounder, and Oscar, again, one thing about Oscar didn't tire. Oscar was a fighter. He would just keep going. He'd come at you. And he was action straight through. And he was a combinational puncher. He was a terror. He would have been a terror for Thomas Hearns, especially using the high guard and walking to him and getting to him. So I just don't think Thomas Hearns stands a chance against Oscar De La Hoya. I think Oscar De La Hoya would win that fight, especially in the later rounds. And just like I said to you guys, y'all thinking of a puncher's chance where Thomas Hearns would have a puncher's chance against Oscar, and I don't even think he has that. And it's the same thing for Floyd Mayweather, except I think Floyd Mayweather would have been, his challenge would have been to get to the inside of Hearns, and I think Floyd would still have done it. I just think that Oscar, I think, is even better equipped than Floyd to do that, because Oscar had been using the high guard all his career. And I'm not saying that Floyd wouldn't do it, because Floyd also uses the high guard, and he would have to be a little bit more athletic, a little bit more quick, just like the young Floyd at super featherweight when he had the challenge of facing Tony Pett. He would have to be a little sharper, a little bit quicker, but I think at the end of the day, Floyd would also rein up combinations on Hearns and get Hearns out of there. But Oscar, of all people, of all styles that you could pick, that's the style that definitely would beat Thomas Hearns. It's based off the blueprint of Sugar Ray Leonard, and definitely Oscar would beat Thomas Hearns. Definitely. You know, he would get to Hearns and he would stop him. I think Oscar would stop Hearns. I don't think so much Floyd would stop Hearns, but I do think Oscar would stop Hearns. Floyd might beat up Hearns, but may not to stop him. But definitely Oscar would stop Hearns. And you guys would be shocked by that. Again, you can't go by nostalgia. You can't go by legend. You have to go by facts. And a lot of y'all don't do that. I remember when people came down hard on me saying, oh, you just kind of defacing the former greats and stuff. No, I'm coming from facts. I'm coming from what these people, how these people got beat in their careers. Who had the tools to beat these guys? And I just don't see Thomas Hearns having the tools as much as Oscar has the tools to beat Oscar De La Hoya. I think Oscar De La Hoya has the tools more so than Hearns does to beat Thomas Hearns. If Oscar got sloppy in there, like Roberto Duran was, yeah, Hearns could get him out of there. That was never going to happen because Oscar always come in peak condition. And people are thinking Oscar will get him out there with the left hook. Y'all need to look again. Oscar has a very good overhand right. But besides that, Oscar will be working to the body. And he would get his left hook into the body as well of Thomas Hearns. And Thomas Hearns didn't have no body at welterweight. He was a string. He was skinny, like a fine wire. And that's what people keep on forgetting. If you want to liken Thomas Hearns to somebody, and some people say this is insulting, he was like Amir Khan. He could box really well until he gets caught. Hearns, if you hit Hearns on the chin, he gonna get punch drunk immediately. You touch him on that chin. What gets Hearns, the shot that hits Hearns on the chin? The overhand right. Guess what Mexicans are famous for? From guys like, even Latino fighters like Marcos Maidana. What are they famous for? The overhand right. You know Hearns was going to get hit on the button with the overhand right by Oscar De La Hoya, and Oscar was going to put him to sleep. It's just what it is. So let's be real, folks. And let's stop fantasizing so far that we stuck up in nostalgia. You got to face the facts and think it through. Have a good one, guys.